Welcome back to the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast and our State of the Program series with the Northwest Missouri State head coaches. This week we're joined by Brandon Masters, the head track and field and cross country coach for the Bearcats. Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
And Brandon's entering his second year as the head coach of the Bearcats. Just what were you able to take away from the last year and a little less than a year still actually from when you got hired? What did you kind of take away from last year and your first year in Maryville here?
Well, the first year was very difficult in that I did arrive so late. So there wasn't a whole lot of recruiting, a lot of things that can happen immediately that first year other than open up a brand new facility, host high-level meets, and host the MIAA championship. That was the goal of the season. And, not knowing my roster, try to get our kids to buy into a culture and to change the mindset of this team. And I think we did a pretty good job in hosting meets. The MIAA Conference Championship was fantastic. And then we had some successes on the track as well.
Did you have a did you kind of see that kind of start to click with some of the kids at any? Is there a point that you can kind of point to where you're like, okay, they're starting to get it? Point of the season.
Yeah, we have a very tough first 6 weeks of training. I saw a big paradigm shift for them.
Yeah.
It was a totally different style of training. I'm a teacher, not necessarily a coach. So everything we do has a reason, and I explain the reason. So I think the first couple of weeks were really tough, a big learning curve. But as they pushed through the first 6 weeks of conditioning, they started to get the reasonings why. And at the end of that 6 weeks, I saw a big shift, a big change in what their expectations were. And then we go into week 7, which we do all sorts of testing, and that's when I really saw the changes and the differences.
And just overall, I know it's not quite like the other sports where you have one season and maybe, I don't know, record to point to or something. You're going all year and have like 3 different seasons. But
Yep.
what do you kind of consider the highlight of last season, or just what do you think of general and how last season went?
I think if we look back at last season, obviously the easy one to look at is the men's indoor nearly pulling off the unthinkable and winning the MIAA championship. We were 6 points out of winning and beating Central. That would have been a fairy tale type of ending, certainly for the start, the indoor season in winning the MIAA. We didn't quite get there. We're certainly an indoor team. I trained us as an indoor team. When you have Hughes Fieldhouse, you have that advantage. So we took that advantage, and the guys stepped up, and I didn't think we had really the depth or the horsepower, but everybody over achieved,
Yeah.
over achieved their ranking going in, and that's how you win a championship.
Obviously, you had production up and down through the classes. I mean, Omar Austin stands out as a younger guy who racked up points. But how important was it to get that buy-in from especially as a new coach coming in from some of those older people? Obviously, you had Kevin do great. Marcus did well too. Just how important was it for you to kind of talk to those older athletes, and did you have a meeting or something to talk to them about your plan and everything, or did they just kind of have that buy-in?
I have a meeting with every single kid. The first 4 to 5 weeks when you're sitting down with each kid to talk about goals, the season expectations. We have that in the first 4 weeks, and it took 4 weeks because there's about 90 of them to go through. And 15 to 30 minutes, or Kevin took a little bit longer because he had a lot of goals and expectations, and we really hit it off. I think that's the big thing is the upperclassmen. Although we didn't have a lot of upperclassmen, they were certainly bought in. They needed a change. They wanted a change, and I couldn't have done it without that. Obviously, as a coach, you want culture, you want buy-in, but you can't stand on your desk and scream at them and say, culture, culture, culture. It has to happen organically, and this team progressed a lot faster than I had anticipated. They needed the change. They wanted to change, and we had upperclassmen to do it. Now, the freshmen, they didn't know any better. We had a nice group of freshmen. They didn't know the previous years and how we did business. So between adding Hughes, new coaching staff, and senior upperclassmen level leaders, we switched this program over to really what I wanted to see a lot faster than anticipated.
And in previous ones of these interviews that people might have listened to, I kind of talked to we go through the season and then talk about the off season and everything. Track and cross country is a little different. You've got 3 seasons. You're going all year, so especially getting hired kind of as late into the process as you did. What was kind of the key last year to keeping your head from spinning too much and figuring out everything and getting settled in?
Well, I think the big thing was focus on what we can control, and that is high-level training, teaching, and then focusing on how well we do those meets and host those meets. We had some great success because of the kids' buy-in and the changes of training. But yeah, it was a tough year. It's certainly going to be a little bit easier this year. I arrived a week before cross country reported, and they were reporting late because we weren't here yet. So, and having Coach Gibson, I said, hey, I want you in this position. He goes, when do I have to be there? And I go, 10 days. And he was in South Carolina, and I was in Colorado at the time, and we worked really hard to get here in that 10-day period so we could have a little bit of time to plan. So we had a whole week before school started, and we had to host a meet, basically 10 days after school started, something like that, and we'd never even been on campus, had been on the course. So it was a rushed year, certainly, and I'm really excited with how it turned out.
Yeah.
Some of the little accolades, this team has been traditionally 8th in our conference, indoor, outdoor, cross country. That's what our average has been over the past 5-6 years. Mm-hmm. And to see our women, we finished 6th indoor and outdoor, and the men finished 5th outdoor, but 2nd indoors. And to see that we don't lose a lot. I mean, obviously we lose Kevin. He scored a lot of points for us as a team leader, but we get to retain his services as a coach. I don't know, many people know that.
I was wondering about that. I don't know if you might have broke a little news there, but yeah. I think we could have guessed that if he was wanting to, he'd probably have a spot.
Yeah, so that's a big deal for us. He'll be a graduate assistant for us next year, and to keep some of that leadership. He provided a huge role for us this year, and he'll continue that the next 2 years, albeit in a little bit different manner. He can't score the points for us.
Yeah.
But, we had some really big things happen this year. 16 academic All-Americans, which was huge. Mm-hmm. All of our teams earned academic All-American team award status, which is a big deal with track and cross country, both men and women. We had 12 All-American selections. 14 Northwest school records, 36 national qualifying marks, 52 performances on the top 10 Northwest history. So you kind of go down that list, and we had a pretty amazing year, and it's because the kids bought in and believed. They could have fought the system, just like any new coach coming in. You hope that the kids can really dive into your system, your philosophy. It can mesh, and you can achieve some really big things. And I couldn't be happier about this year and how it progressed.
Yeah, like you said, experienced a lot of success this year. But what's kind of your outlook on the next couple years, or at least this next year? What kind of do you think you need to or the program needs to do to kind of take that next step even and just keep building on the success of this year?
Well, track and field is a lot like any other sport in that
Yeah.
you've got to find your niche to win. All right, you got to look at your conference, look at your opponents, and understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and put a plan in place to be able to beat them. And track and field is a little bit different than basketball or football in that we score points based on top 8 performances at the conference meet only. We don't have a win-loss record. It is simply conference. That's it. Indoor, conference, outdoor. Now, obviously nationals as well, and that's a whole different game. But for conference championships, you've got to figure out how to score the most points and see where your opponents are scoring their points and try to see how our strengths line up with what we need. And we know right now that we have a really solid group this year. We got to recruit, and didn't last year, obviously, but we have to recruit based on what we had learned from the conference, the research that we put in, and I feel like we are in a position with the recruits coming in to score more points than we did last year. And that is the goal. It's like, look at our conference, how do we fit in, how do we score the points that we need?
Like we talked about earlier, there's not a lot of a break in the school year for you. You've got 3 seasons running kind of on top of each other there, and all 3 obviously fall, winter, and spring seasons. So, how does recruiting kind of work for cross country and track and field, and what is it just all about this summer trying to catch up, or is it, do you kind of have to balance that through the season, and just take us through a little bit what your kind of schedule is to getting the next generation of Bearcats, I guess.
You bet. Recruiting is year round. Yeah, you hit it. We start in the fall with the season of cross country and go right into indoor and go right into outdoor, and the kids get a little bit of break in the summertime. Those cross kids are already training for cross. So the cross kids are really the year round workhorses. But for recruiting, it never ends. Fall is very, very important. I didn't have any fall last year, so this summer is all about positioning ourselves to bring on as many kids onto campus as possible in the fall, to start when that fall signing begins. We didn't have any of that. This past fall was terrible, so we had to really work hard to bring kids in over late fall and spring and even to the summer. I just finished with a girl who came in on Friday, 4th of July weekend, to commit to me for fall of this year. So it never ends, and it's pretty late to find a commit or signee this late in the summer for fall. So a lot of our recruiting is based off of junior numbers. So when their junior track and field and cross country numbers come out and we talk to coaches, it's based on that, and got to get your little crystal ball out to see how they're going to do as a senior in high school. But mostly they're being recruited off of their junior accolades. So we have to bring in a big group in the fall. So that's why this year's recruiting class, albeit very talented, and I'm very excited about who we have next year. It is just a glimpse into what we should have done had we had a full summer of recruiting for Northwest.
So not to get into the individuals of that class or anything, but just in general, what have you liked about the group you were able to bring in despite all of that, and what's some strengths coming out of this group?
I think on the men's side we didn't have as much ability to grow in size and numbers. We had a lot of kids coming back. Obviously, Kevin was about the only scholarship that we had available to recruit on. So I would say that our men's class might be definitely is a little bit smaller, although very high caliber. I feel like we're going to have a breakout season in cross country with the men. I feel like we're a solid team. How they mesh, what kind of mileage and what kind of work do they put in over this summer without us? Hopefully they come in fit. But I feel like our cross country and through track and field, those guys will definitely be an impact on the track. We had to, we redshirted a couple of guys, Kareem being the big one, redshirting him outdoors, so we didn't have his services, and he's a good 16, 18 points in the conference outdoors. Would have definitely, we wouldn't have finished fifth. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So, with a couple more guys around him, what can they do on the cross side, and then extending into indoor and outdoor. So we're excited about the guys squad. We do have some young guys coming in, 400 guys, 800 guys. I feel like can step up and do some good stuff at the conference level, and then some sprinters as well. That I don't know what I got yet with those guys. Their sprints in the MIAA are pretty tough, so it might take a year to get those guys ready to score, but I think we're ready for a really nice year. Women's side, we have a very large class, freshmen, mostly freshmen that come from all over, that are talented, and I'm excited. Super raw. I think what I have is probably 5 or 6 ladies that really don't know what they're doing yet, and they've had good numbers, so that's exciting. We have a huge upperclassmen group that scores a majority of our points this year on the women's side. We redshirted a couple ladies in preparation for this year. So last year was about getting through last year and trying to learn and get the culture of the program on the ladies' side, but not necessarily have the strength as a team. And this year we do. And I think our complement of ladies coming in, really exciting to see what they do this year. I think the ladies are ready for a breakout season in track and field. Cross country, we're still a little young on the cross country side. I think our indoor and outdoor track is going to be pretty fun to watch this year on the ladies' side.
Yeah, and you kind of take me into it there, but the the question everybody dreads. Nobody likes the cliche goals question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What are your goals look like for this year, and what, obviously you haven't had a chance to really meet with the whole team yet or anything, but what going into the year are some accomplishments you'd like to see this group accomplish?
Well, I think I'm very competitive, and my goal is always to win the conference. Are we able to? Do we have the horsepower yet? We're gonna be pretty good. Can we win? We have the depth. We have some of the talent, but we're very young still. Ladies, on the ladies' side, okay, we're very young. Can we win? I don't know, man. Pittsburgh's pretty tough. Missouri Southern's always really good. So we got some. I mean, it's the #1 conference in the country in track and field. It's not easy to do, but that always is the goal. Last year was about surviving. This year is about winning. Do we have enough? Not sure yet. Talk to me in about 12 weeks or so when I have a good chance to look at all the kids coming in, what they've done over the break, how we did in cross country. So I think men and women, both indoor and outdoor track and field, are going to be scary good. And are we good enough? I don't know yet.
And coming in, we talked about some of the older, or not necessarily older, because like I said, a lot of them were still young, other than Kevin. But what do you see from kind of the younger first year athletes last year? Omar's obviously the highlight one that racked up a lot of points, and he's been busy this summer too. So you can kind of talk about him a little bit if you'd like. But what do you see from kind of those younger athletes coming in, and where do you hope to see them take that next step this year?
Sure. Generally speaking, I don't get the big improvements, the big changes until year 2. A lot of times it's about getting through year. And that's upperclassmen, that's freshmen. Remember, the upperclassmen have to be kind of treated as freshmen because it's a brand new system.
Yeah.
They haven't been trained this way. Totally different. So I tend to see massive growth in year 2. They know their expectations. They know what's coming. They've developed in the weight room. So I feel like we're poised for a breakout season. I feel just to speak about Omar, obviously had a really good year. He was really didn't have all his tools sharpened.
Still a little raw, huh?
When he came in, he was extremely raw. Didn't know how to really. He wasn't trained for a 400 runner. Okay,
Yeah.
so I trained him as a 400 runner my way, which is a little bit different than others. But he had some really big success early, and as we typically see in freshmen, kind of faded a little bit late because it's a long season. I'm asking these kids to come in September, early September, and start training, and most of them, our conditioning part of our program is longer than their entire track season in high school. So knowing that that first 8 weeks will be a little bit different for them this year, before we lace them up for real in December and run. But the season won't be as long for them. The game will slow down, as you always hear in football or basketball. The game slows down. The same thing. We develop and they understand how to get through the season. So I should see a big growth in a lot of kids. Change the training slightly with a couple of people now that I know who they are and what they're capable of. Marcus, for instance, obviously had an unbelievable year in the long jump, but I trained him more as a multi. And so we train a little bit more speed, a little bit more power by still doing the multi. He can then go after that 8-meter jump that we'd love for him to get. So, I'm really excited about this year just because year two always I see somebody blow up, and after seeing what we did in year one, I'm really excited.
And to wrap up, obviously I'm assuming a major reason that attracted you to this job and a major recruiting pitch for all your new athletes coming in is the Hughes Field House. You mentioned it earlier with being an indoor team, but what's that been like to have that, and how big an advantage is that for you guys to be able to train and do everything involving that you can do in the Hughes Fieldhouse over there?
Well, Northwest is an awesome school and a great location. Maryville is an unbelievable town, and they support their their Bearcats like no other town. It's an unbelievable place to be. But I would not be here without Hughes. That was the bit that had to happen for me to be here, and the big draw, coupled with the other things. It's not just because of Hughes, but Hughes allows me. I've never had an indoor facility before, so being able to really train at a high level, to be on a track surface and really hone our craft. It's unbelievable the changes. I don't have to have 3 workouts planned for each day dependent upon weather. It's 68 degrees every day in Maryville. Just open the door and go in Hughes. It's always nice. It's a 300-meter track. It's 90 yards of turf. You go in there and it blows people's minds. Recruits come in, they're like, oh my gosh, this thing is massive. It is unbelievable place to train. It is one of the fastest, if not the fastest track in the country. Just come run on it. We have unreal stadium records after just 1 year. So having that for recruiting, massive. Just get a kid on campus. The campus is beautiful. The town is great. There's trees and flowers. It's just amazing, beautiful campus. But you walk into Hughes, and that's just the hook. I mean, kids really know that they could be special being able to train in a facility like that year round. So, I got to get them here and get them over to Hughes, and everything has to line up academically and other, but it's been a huge recruiting tool, no doubt.
And now, what's your just to kind of wrap up? What's your schedule coming up here, and when can you start working with? I know you've got a little. You don't start quite as early as the other fall sports, but you start pretty early. So when can you start working with kids again? When can they get back on? Obviously, they can come on campus whenever they want, but when can you start working with them, and what's your schedule like the next couple months here?
Well, cross country can report early, fall sport, and so we'll have those guys and gals in about 10 days or so before school starts, so we can really start working on it. With Nick Gibson, Coach Gibson's assistant coach and cross country guru, so he's my distance guy. So I'm going to support him, what he needs, and be there for the kids when they arrive for cross country. But track kids report as normal students, so we don't start until the day after Labor Day. So as soon as they get back from that 3-day weekend, we're going to start. So it's not a lot to do in the summer but recruit and really start finishing up and the plan for the fall. It'll change slightly, not a lot, but it'll change a little bit. So I got to continue to work on that and finalize that program. But for me, it's July 8th. We got a ways to go yet before the season starts, but I'm looking forward to this year, and I can't wait for the kids to arrive because if we can get it all put together, it's going to be a pretty scary team, both men and women.
Well, we can't wait to see that either, Coach, and we'll be excited to see you in all your home meets for sure this year. But thanks for joining us today.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.